you have to know about these two cars because they are two of the most important three cars coming to market in the next year or so here in Europe, and I really mean that. So the BYD Seagull has created this whole storm online simply because it ticks almost every box. And it does for me, definitely. Other than this car, though, at this end of the market, sub €20,000, there are only cheap EVs that are really not good enough, such as the Dacia Spring. It doesn't really have a proper sized battery, especially for 2024. I mean, it has like a Nissan Leaf first generation size battery, and the tech in it is not up to date at all. And it doesn't have battery cooling or heating, which is just a big no-no, especially when you can see that the BYD Seagull, which does have that, if you get the difference between the cheapest and the most expensive version of the BYD Seagull is quite a big difference in the battery size, and also it does have full AC, thermal management on that battery, which is a really big deal. So since making these videos over the past year and a half, I've realized that you are a really smart bunch of people, and I know some of you are engineers and you're interested in the tech that goes into these cars, and I've come to realize that I really believe these manufacturers, they know this now. I think they're realizing it, aren't they? They can't fool you, and they won't be able to sell their cars, even if it's a good car like a Dacia Spring, if it's if it doesn't have battery cooling on it. You all know about the battery cooling. So that's what I think. I wanted to poll about it, and I asked you about your interests, and almost all of you said basically that you're interested in the tech that goes into these EVs, basically. So let's compare the main metrics for the BYD Seagull and the Hyundai Inster, otherwise known as the Hyundai Casper in Korea, where it's from. Just as a side note, the battery for the Hyundai Casper is a 35 kilowatt hour battery, which is not the ones we're going to get. We're going to get a smaller one than that and a bigger one than that. So the BYD Seagull is 1,240 kilos if you get the biggest battery, which is the only one to get simply because it has LFP chemistry with cooling and air conditioning on it, and water extraction, and it actually uses the air conditioning system, the compressor, to run that heat out of the car, basically. The Hyundai Inster is 1,400 kilograms if you get the biggest one, so I guess they're much of a muchness, really. The slightly extra bit of weight, 1,400 kilos, probably makes the Inster feel a little bit nicer, maybe. But it is nicer when these small cars are lighter, obviously, because it's less efficient when they're heavy. So the max power for the Seagull is 75 horsepower, and the maximum power for the long-range Inster is 113 horsepower. And the least power you get in the Inster is 95 horsepower. So, I'm perfectly fine with 75 horsepower, but 95 or 113 would be better, but it's perfectly fine either way. The size of them, I'm not going to go into the metrics. A lot of people talk about the millimeter differences. They're comparable, basically. Both small little cars, similar size. The Inster, though, has 100% flat seats in the rear, so that you can fold them down completely flat like this, like a Honda Jazz, and have a really good sleep in the back with a couple of duvets and some pillows. I literally do this all the time. Every year I'm doing that. And I think it's the coolest thing if you can have completely flat seats in your cars. You definitely can't do this in the Seagull. This was something I'd noticed, and I think it's a bit of a downer. For some people, you won't care about that. For some of us, though, we camp in our cars. It's definitely a thing. The Inster will go 150 kilometers per hour, and the BYD Seagull will go 130. BYD also say that they want the Seagull to come to Europe and be sold for less than 20,000 euros. But now with this extra tariff, I'm pretty sure they won't be doing that. And I think it'll be 20 or 22,000 euro by the time it's for sale here in Europe next year, until they get the new BYD factory opened in Europe, which is not open currently. The Hyundai Inster, they're aiming for 23,000 euro to 25,000 euro. Should be able to order that by the end of this year and receive it next year. So much of a muchness. There's not too much difference, really. I personally think the Insta is better looking, and I just did a poll on the community section of the channel, which I will just go check now. Actually, I haven't checked it. 13 votes currently. 69% of you think the better looking car is the BYD Seagull. So we can probably go with the BYD Seagull. I don't know. So the Hyundai Inster is also a Hyundai. Typically, they've got really beautiful switches and handles, and the seats are really nice. They drive really, really nice. slightly nicer than BYD, actually, I think. The buttons on the steering on a Hyundai, so for that reason as well, I'd give this one a win for Hyundai, but BYD, it's a really good car. They're really nice. If you drove on a motorway at the slowest real possible speed in Europe, 90, 92, and you're following trucks for long distances down the motorways, in the BYD Seagull, you'll likely get something in summer, but in warmer weather, 280 to 290 kilometers, maybe something like that. The Insta will get 350 to 370, something like that. I think if you can drive 300 kilometers as a minimum, then I think you can start to feel like you can treat the car like a totally usable car and kind of almost assume it's going to have power in it. Less than this, I think it starts to become kind of like a 5 or 10-year-old little, like a Nissan Leaf. It's something you have to deal with, and you're always tethered to a charger or your house, basically. And this isn't great for someone like me, I think, because on occasion, multiple times a year, I like to take big trips. So that's kind of a bit of a bugger, but it's not the biggest issue in the world. The BYD Seagull is fine, but it will be better when they bring the V2 blade battery out with something like 30% more range, and they put them into the Seagull. I can definitely live with 75 horsepower and 350 kilometer range in the Seagull. But I have to give the win, I think, to the Inster. I think it basically beats the BYD Seagull in basically most of the important factors for me. The metrics, they're noticeably better. I also feel like the value of the Insta will hold up better than the value of the BYD Seagull once it's 3, 4, 5 years old. One of the main reasons, I think, is because it doesn't have the stigma of a Chinese vehicle or a Chinese brand. This is a realistic consideration for people that will be buying these cars, I think. I could be wrong. I've been a bit of a BYD Seagull fan for the past sort of year, basically, because it's a brilliant car. I just love it. But I'm trying to be really impartial, I'm trying not to be biased when I do this reconciliation. What do you all think? I think I've done that good enough. I could have, gone through any number of metrics here, but I think I got the main ones. If I asked you, though, what was more important to you, what would you say? So you could say range, power, battery chemistry, looks, or manufacturer brand, manufacturer/brand. What would you say? Can you let me know in the comments? I'm interested to know what you all think. Thank you for watching. I'm Ben Alexander, and I make EV news videos every day. This one's a bit different, though. I know that people will be keen to see a reconciliation video between these two cars, hence why I did it. And yeah, this is not obviously so much news, but this car also, the Hyundai Inster, a lot of people still don't know about it. But it is a real car. You'll be able to buy one, this year and get it next year in Europe for not too much money, really. So that's a really nice thing. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.